Welcome to our inaugural episode of I'm Not Yelling, I'm Dominican podcast, where we chat about life and solutions to vibing higher. I'm Nachi, and I'm here with my hitter to my left and right, my homie and my beloved sister, Damaris. We're two sisters raised in the Bronx, New York by amazing Dominican parents. And like many first generation American born Dominicans and other Caribbeanites, we experienced growing up in two separate cultures, which at times brought conflict when trying to adapt to American traditions, but many other times much pride in our roots. This podcast will explore barriers and challenges in life and look at alternatives to vibe higher in the face of these challenges. So grab your cafecito or tea, sit back, and let's vibe. So let's get into this. Today, we're going to talk about existing and establishing boundaries, something that's unheard of in many Dominican families. I mean, I'm just learning about setting boundaries myself, and I'm in my 40s. So let's start off by asking, what is boundary? What's the definition of boundaries? What does that mean? Sister, what say you?
Hey y'all, I'm Damaris, affectionately known as the Slim Reaper by my family. And yeah, I'm excited about this topic. I think very much so because it's something that, as you mentioned, even in our 40s, we're just kind of figuring this stuff out and really trying to understand the boundaries, understand what they are, and how we use them. Um, it has been something that I think I've definitely used in my life, but not explicitly. And it's nice to be in a place in my life where I could feel like, okay, yes, I'm actually being more deliberate with boundaries. So I'd say for me, the way I define boundaries really is simple. It's what is and what is not okay with me. And I would say for you, like what is and what is not okay for you. That should be your boundary. That should be your litmus test of what a boundary is. How do you define it?
Well, you know, going back to the fact that this is new to me, right? Because I don't think I ever understood what boundaries were, in the sense of setting one and ensuring that that my needs are being met, per se. So, when I started when boundaries started to come into play for me, or at least when I started to understand that I have to set boundaries, otherwise other people are going to walk all over me or take advantage of me wanting to do for them, because that is just something that I've learned through watching my mother. Like mommy
Mm-hmm.
was always there for everyone, for us, for Boppy, her sisters, her brothers.
Right.
It was
Her
endless,
niece and
right?
nephews, everyone, yes.
Right, everyone. It was endless. And that was just something that I saw that I needed to emulate,
Mm-hmm.
I to be that person, that I can count on. So I learned that you could still be there for your family and friends,
Right.
and even professional wise, be there for your coworkers, your colleagues, but there has to be certain parameters that have to be set so that one, you can function, um, to the best of your ability,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time you're still meeting the needs
Right.
of people around you. So now I understand it to be what you just said,
Right.
is kind of making sure that you know you are being treated in a way that's acceptable to you, um and that's just new for me.
Yeah, I think that's when y- thinking about how we want to talk about carve this and structure this conversation. I view it as definitely identifying boundaries within my professional and my personal life. And I think personal life is there are a lot more boundaries, and it's harder to be true to those boundaries. Whereas I find personally for me that when it comes to professional boundaries, it was much easier to execute. So when it came to my profession, especially when I worked in corporate America, and the first part of my career, and for the bulk of my career has been in a corporate setting, I remember early on that there were, in the beginning, I was working long hours and staying there past 5 o'clock, and then it just dawned on me, and I don't know how or why. It's probably my spirit guides or something, but it just dawned on me that, why am I staying here past 5 o'clock? Number one, I work in an
Right.
industry. I worked in asset management. We were on the buy side, which meant that we followed the stock market. The market closes at 4, and honestly, if you're not like part of the trading or sales team, then you really should not be there past 5 o'clock. It just doesn't require you to be there past 5. So I would just think to myself, I started to think to myself, why am I here past 5 o'clock? Number one,
Right.
you don't pay me enough. You just
Right.
don't. My value
Right.
is
Right.
too high. You can't afford me, honestly. But whatever you are paying me is not enough for me to stay to go above and beyond. Because
Right.
I knew the quality of work that I delivered was spectacular. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not tooting my own horn, but yes, I am tooting my own horn because no one else is going to do it for me. But I delivered. So I'm going above and beyond to not then get paid for that or to be compensated for that. And which was surprising for being young and new to corporate America, which I didn't realize that the corporate lifestyle really is just there to get you at your cheapest as an employee. And but here's what I was like, well, I'm not going to give you everything because I know you're not giving me everything. So
Right.
that was a boundary for me of, when I walk out those doors, number one, I'm walking out those doors at 5 o'clock, unless there's like some major project. And there are always exceptions to the rule, obviously.
Right.
But
Right.
if there's no major project, or work is on track, and then I'm not staying there past 5. That's number one. That's boundary number one. Boundary number two is that once I walk out those doors, I am not checking email. I'm not making any phone calls. Why? You don't pay me enough.
And
You
that's
don't pay me enough.
right, right. And I agree with that. And I think with our generation, we're in
We're Gen
between
X, by the
our
way.
we're between, our parents, generation, the generation before us, where when it came to work, it was like you worked hard because that was the mentality. You work hard and you'll get rewarded. So you got to go above and beyond. So
Mm-hmm.
working, um, your hours, or doing extra, it looks favorable to you, right? And then and that's where that whole staying in your job for years and years and years.
Right,
And I
right.
think that's something that we've adopted in our like I've been with
Mm-hmm.
company that I've been with for 14 years or so, and I think with you the same thing,
Yep,
right? Where when you was in corporate America, it was about 14, 15 years
yep.
with the same company. And I can appreciate the generation today where they're like, no, for just like you said, you're not paying me enough.
Right.
It's never going to be enough. And it's
Never.
even worse when you stay in that company
Mm-hmm.
for a very long time, because you're never going to be paid as much as you're worth or what the market is for, because you've already started from
Right.
entry level and then kind of work
Yeah.
yourself up, especially if there's no structure around, like, oh, this is I'm going to jump you into a certain salary range.
Right.
It's just like, oh, you get your 15% or
Right.
10%,
Right.
which is not the same. But um you know like I said, I agree. I appreciate the generation now where they're just, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna do 2 years and I'm gonna go somewhere. I'm gonna use you for what I need you
Right.
for. And
Yeah.
that kind of, sets the stage for them
No,
and
that
setting
I
those boundaries.
I like that. I think it's smart of them. for me and for my generation of that and that time, where I set my boundaries in addition to the time that I left was also when it came to my vacation time.
Mm-hmm.
That was that personal time is precious to me. And so if you're paying me for my time off, then I'm going to take the time off. I took that very seriously, and I also expected to be respected, my time to be respected. So my bosses were very, I made it very clear to my bosses, um, under no under no uncertain terms, that when I'm on vacation, I'm not to be communicated with, because I'm not going to be available to communicate back, regardless if it's a domestic or international trip. I'm just that bitch. I mean, the reality is, like, again, you don't pay me enough
Right.
to have me working on my vacation.
Right. Right.
Bruh.
But there are people who
Yes,
make themselves available.
there were people that I worked with, even my bosses, and my personal life was separate from my work life. And it was very much, look, when I'm off the clock. I'm not you don't own all of me and all of my time. And that was very important for me in the way I protected that was by being very clear when I would go away, by being very clear when I took the time off, whether it
Right.
was local, whether I was just taking every Friday off every summer, which I did do one year, by the way. And that's just the key. But I also had good relationships with my managers. So it's not to say, like, if anyone's listening to this and saying, like, oh my goodness, she just did whatever the hell she wanted. No, I delivered and then some.
Right. Right. Right.
My 65% that I put into that job was someone else's, were actually many people's 100.
Right. Right.
Not my problem, not my fault that I was great at my job. It's just it was what it was. And
Right.
so I was able to have my boundaries respected, because I know not everybody is in that situation. But to your point, like, when I think about the younger generation now, and they're very clear on, look, this is what I will tolerate, this is what I won't tolerate, this is what I'm expecting. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so too. And for me, when it comes professionally, I I'm just learning again, even with my job and setting certain boundaries. And I think I was sort of forced into it because, with children and with
Right.
mommy, um, I just didn't have the time that, to spend
Hmm.
extra on work. But that came from that mentality of, oh, this is my job, and I need to show them that I am dedicated,
Hmm.
that I'm a great worker, that I work hard. And there were times that I was working late, take my laptop home and do some work. But now I have to set certain boundaries around that, where it's like, no, I can't. I have to do X, Y, and Z for my children, or I have to, you know, do this for mommy. I cannot do that. So
Yeah.
I think for me it was forced upon. I had to make those decisions, but I don't I don't believe that that was something that I was doing before,
Hmm.
where I'll say it depends on who I worked for. This company that I work for is very different than ones that I've worked for in the past, and you know how I did.
Yes. Yes. Those companies shall remain nameless.
Yes, yes. Like, don't play with me. Do not play.
The BX came out.
Yes, yes. Oh, you try me? Okay, I got something for you. you know, but with my current company, they're great people. They're great people to work for, but the culture has always been there is to be available all the time. Like that was, I'll catch up with you.
I think that came from our parents, in particular your father.
Yes.
I mean, Bobby worked two jobs. Amen. God
Mm-hmm.
bless. Like both of our
Yes.
parents had two jobs. Your mom, she had her day job, and then at night she was taking care of us, making dinner and lunch for your father for the next day. So her second job was taking care of the home, and then your father worked two full jobs, and we didn't see him till just the weekends because
Right.
left at 6 a.m.,
Yes.
home by
Mm-hmm.
midnight.
Right.
But one of the things, obviously, that he's left with us, I would say, I mean, I can speak for myself, but I think you'd agree, is that when it came to work, again, he was one of those that he was very skilled at what he did. So he was
Mm-hmm.
able to do the work. His 60%, 70% was someone else's 100, which means that he would finish his jobs and projects
Right.
much sooner, much earlier than the average engineer. And so he would talk about that. He had his little TV. Would have his little
Yes.
setup
You
in his
remember
little
TV?
yeah. He had a little TV, a little setup, and he would take a nap
His
when he needed to.
newspaper.
Yes, and I I was just like, oh, so half the time you at your jobs, either one, you're like sleeping, or you're reading, or you're
Yeah.
watching TV, and
Right.
you're getting
Right.
paid for that. You know what? That's what you should be doing. He didn't let them
Right.
hustle him. He hustled
Right.
them, and he had his boundaries.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think about that, and I think about ensuring that, especially when I worked at my last corporate job, about not feeling like I'm being taken advantage of, or at least getting what I should be getting out of this.
Right.
Max
Right.
capitalizing on what I have, and I did. For me, I think about, I was grandfathered into their time off program, which allowed me 6 to 7 weeks off in a year, and I could roll over 1 week, and I would make sure that I would use, if I had 6 weeks that year, then I would use five so I could roll over 1 week, but I would
Right.
use
Right.
all five, and I didn't hesitate, where I knew people that in other jobs and other companies that felt guilty almost
To
for
take
to
off.
take time off. And I
Hmm.
just thought that was absurd, because that is time that they're being paid to take off. So that is their time. Like, to think that you should feel guilty for taking what you've earned, what you've worked for, the time off, is absurd.
Right.
And so,
I'll admit, I used to feel guilty for um taking time off for sick leave. Like
hmm,
that, I don't know why, but it was
because
just
that
like,
was
oh,
your mother. We never took off of school. If
yeah,
we was
I
Even
know.
if we
She
had
was
like
like,
a cold or maybe close to a fever, she would
go.
still send us to school. Like, we were I remember having perfect attendance pretty much almost every year of school that we went.
Yes,
That's
I
absurd.
no, it is. I always feel guilty
That's
when,
your mama.
and I rarely call in sick. Like I have to be really off that day, and that's rare for me to
Your
call
children have
in
no
sick.
issues calling sick
No.
for school.
Oh no, no. And you know what? And recently I respected that. I would
God
just let
bless.
them say, because
Speaking of family, this is a nice segue into the boundaries within families, and I think about, I always think about just our childhood and the start of developing those boundaries in your personal relationships. And in particular, I think about the good and the bad with your parents, especially, these are Caribbean people. They have a very different perspective when it comes to boundaries in the house
yes, like
with their
none,
children, right?
like none.
You don't pay rent here, so you
Right.
don't have the right to close doors, invite people, do what you want, slam doors,
Exactly.
any of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
None
I'm
of
like,
that.
okay. It's,
You
I
can express your anger in
there's
any
no
kind of way.
there's no expressing
But
yourself as a young
no,
child.
no, no.
But one of the ways that I feel that your parents were good about, with us and our boundaries, especially when we had guests come over,
Yes.
and guests could come over, we would greet them, but we would very quickly go right back upstairs to our bedrooms and do whatever we wanted to do. We did not bother to stay downstairs and entertain the guests with our parents,
Right.
even
Like
if they
some of our other friends.
right. And even if the people that came had kids our age, we'd be like,
Mhm.
bye.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, bye. And your parents were fine. They were like, okay, they said hi. The girls said hi. They're good.
Right.
And that was great because you know what? Like, to this day, and I think you're all like this with your kids. Yeah, you shouldn't force your kids
No.
to engage with others if they don't feel like it.
And that's
I'm a
yeah.
proponent for that, and I'm grateful to your parents that they did not push that agenda on us. Like, you gotta be this way with certain people, because you know what, certain people, especially other adults, don't need that from kids.
Yeah. 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 Especially with children. That was something that I knew and learned about was that you shouldn't force children to interact with adults because that's
Right.
kind of opening that door, you know, um to adults who could sexually abuse the
Mm-hmm.
children, and because they're so conditioned to I have to, you
Right.
know, appease this adult because that's my, you know, that's what I need to do, that's what
Mm-hmm.
I've been taught. And I didn't realize that connection until, of course, you know, having children, like, oh, you know what, that's, you know, that's very true. I can see how that can bridge, you know,
Yeah.
that connection with someone that you don't even realize, because you know, a lot of the time the
Right.
sexual abuse is through someone
Someone
that
they know.
they know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't force it on my kids either, you know. At the very
Yeah.
least, I'm like, say hello. You
Right.
know?
Right. Cordial.
Right, right.
Just a nice example of boundaries from your parents. But then
Yes. Hmm.
the on the opposite end of the spectrum was the limited privacy we had from them, meaning uh,
Right.
my favorite story is of your mail being opened by your father.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Let me just share this story.
I mean, good reason. The intentions were
No,
good.
no, it was, and I appreciate it. And to be honest, it really didn't bother me. You know, I wasn't, because I guess
Because we were
I didn't expect.
conditioned,
Right,
we were
right.
conditioned to
I
not
wasn't
have.
right. I wasn't expecting you to respect my privacy. So it wasn't. You know how you see TV shows and you see the kids like, "Mom, Dad,
No,
why did you
especially,
open my stuff?"
yeah, we grew up watching mainstream television of these white families and the occasional black family, but more often than not, the white family, and it's just like the kid is yelling at the parent or they're slamming their bedroom doors.
Yes,
And I would
I'm
be
amazed.
flabbergasted.
I'm
I'm
like,
just like, in what universe can
wow.
you do that? I'm like,
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
Wow, not gonna
That's
try
bold.
that, but that's interesting because I know what's gonna happen if I try that.
Right, right. A true smackdown. That's what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. So to your point, right? We didn't really, you weren't affected by this violation
No,
of privacy, but
no,
when we
no.
share the story, those will understand that. Yeah, that was a boundary that was crossed.
Yes. Well, like most children, when they go to college and they get a little taste of freedom, one of those freedoms is getting their first credit card. I didn't really need a credit card, but you know, they're right there in the student union
Oh,
hall. And
they get you early.
yes, hey, here, get sign up. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I had my credit card, came back home, and you know, I didn't have a job. I graduated from school,
Of
didn't
course
have a
not.
job.
Sure.
So if I don't have any money, what am I paying?
Wow.
You can send me all the bills you want. I can't pay you. I don't have any money. So I wouldn't even open it because I knew what it was. It was a bill, and I would just leave it there on the counter. And your father was just like, "Mommy, what's is this your credit card bill? Is this a bill?" I'm like, "Yeah." But he was like, "You have to pay this." Bobby, with what money? I don't work. When I start working, I'll pay them. He was
Oh,
like, "Oh
child.
no, mommy, no, 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 no."
He's like, you don't know what a
Like
credit
you,
score is, baby.
yes, he was like, "You're gonna mess up your credit score. That's very important. You need to just make sure that it gets paid." He was like, "You know what? I will pay it for you until you get a job, but please don't ever do this again." I was
This is
like,
why people will
"Okay."
call us spoiled. We didn't enforce anything because this is kind of what we expected, but that is a certain level of boundary that, for better for worse, maybe shouldn't have been crossed, but it worked. It was for better for you in this example.
Right.
But definitely, I think of other friends that I know that have, you know, a lack of boundaries with their parents even as adults, and it's like their
Mm-hmm.
parents are still driving them crazy, and I'm grateful that even when your father was alive, he didn't drive us crazy as an adult, and your mom is super compliant, super like easygoing, that she's, that she goes with whatever we say and she rides with it. And so I think though those are great examples, but I see you and I know you as a parent, you've done a lot of evolving, and there's always learning to be had as a parent. And even with the boundaries with your kids. So one of the things, like, for me, I think about, while I may not be a parent, I am a titi that is like a parent to my niece and
Right.
nephew.
Right.
Praise God.
All right.
And so there is, when you and I discuss certain matters with your kids, there are times when I tell you, cut that cord.
Right.
I'm
Yes.
just like, let them fall.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
not because I want them to get hurt, but I need them. But part of it is the learning and the experience. And sometimes you just don't get it until, right, until you go through it. But it's also, I view it as a boundary for yourself, because I want my sister to live a long life, but I see these kids draining her and stressing her the F out, that I'm just like, okay, you're allowing these kids to have a certain level of stressing you out, where I just feel like, no, you can,
Just cut it out.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can draw that line, and at that point, it's right. You just
Right.
gotta give it
Right.
to God, and just let the cards fall where they fall, and let the cookie
Right.
crumble where it
Right.
crumbles, and
Right.
all that good stuff. And so,
You
yeah.
know, yeah, and kind of just with my experience growing up, um, and I think you said that you didn't really experience this, but I feel like I haven't, maybe because I was the oldest. And so, but especially from like your mother was very stern, and she was the enforcer, right? Where Poppy was like, okay, he was the one that set the rules, which we didn't really know. We thought mommy was the
He
rule.
pretended to be good cop,
Yes,
and
yes,
mommy was
yes,
bad cop, but he was
yes,
actually bad cop too.
yes, yes. He was, but he was just like, I'm not gonna let them think that I'm the bad
He's
one.
like, I'm good cop, I'm fun puppy.
Right, right.
Fuck out of here.
So she was the enforcer, and the thing is, well, yes, he was fun Poppy, but when you're the enforcer, this one thing about Dominican women, they're not nice about it, right? It's not about, oh, what do you need? Look, listen to me. This is why we're doing X, Y, and Z. It's like, do it, shut up, I don't want to hear it. All
And do
right.
it
And
because I
that's it.
say so. There's
Right,
no
right,
why.
right. Like, don't ask me why, just do it. And that's it. And don't have your friends ask me for anything. All of that. It's the approach, and it reminds me of one that we had, an interaction that we had recently, right? Because I thought about it and I started laughing. So remember when you were like, oh, let's do this podcast recording. What was it on Saturday morning? And I was like, no, I don't want to do Saturday morning.
Right.
And you said, why? What you doing? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I
because I
just
was
don't want. No, I said, it's my boundaries. I don't want to do it Saturday
wilding
morning.
out, wilding out. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
calm down.
yes, yes. And you were like, calm down. And I said, you said, well, you asked me, how is it a boundary? And I said,
Yeah.
because I don't want to start anything early in the morning, like before 12. Let's just put it that. I don't want to do anything in the morning on the day that I'm supposedly off from work and do this in the morning. I want some time to kind of ease into my day, yada yada. And you're like, okay, well, you could have just said that, right? So
Right.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think communication is my problem. Setting boundaries because I think about relationships that I've had in the past
Right.
and how I would blow up and I would tell you about them and you would always say, calm down, bitch.
Yes.
Like, why are you wilding out? And I'm like, but I'm just saying,
Because
don't
there was something else to it. And it
right.
was just
And as I was reflecting on that, it because I was just like, okay, what bothered me? Like,
what was the trigger?
why did right? What triggered me that I snapped in the way that I snapped? And I was like, okay, I didn't like being questioned. I said what I said, right? I don't like being questioned. Okay, where does that come from? Why don't you like to be questioned? Oh, okay. Well, because growing up, you know how we couldn't do much of anything.
Right.
And if you asked, oh, can I go here or can I go there? It was like you get this blank look like, oh, why are you even
like we were
asking?
asking a stupid
Yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah. So it was almost like I had to think about, okay, I need to come up with a reason why I want to do X, Y, and Z whenever I would approach mommy about it, right? So that I can get a yes, right? Because my goal was I want a yes. So how do I approach this in a way that I'm going to get a yes? Most of the time was, well, I just won't tell her. I'll just tell her something else. And
you were of that cut. Ask for forgiveness.
yes. I'll just do and ask for forgiveness later.
Good Lord.
Because it was just too much for me to think about, okay,
so let me lie to my parents.
Yes.
That's a great course of action. Yes.
Yes, the easiest way. So for me, that's my trigger now. Like, so when anyone questions my decision, it's like, oh, well, I gotta explain to you why I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. Wow. I just don't want to do it, right?
Wow.
So I have to take a step back and communicate clear. And okay, I don't want to do it in the morning because I just want my time in the morning.
That's boom, wonderful, bam, sister.
Right. And that would have been the end, right? That would have been the end. But it was like, I just don't want to, like I got hyped real quick. And you're right. Like, bitch, come on now.
Yeah, I was just like, okay. I was just asking why you couldn't, you get up early in the morning. So I just thought this is going to work.
But it was,
there was everything questioned. Else.
Yes, it was being questioned. And then like I said, I thought about other relationships that I've had, romantic relationships,
right?
Specifically, where, the dude would ask me something and I would answer it, right? But then when you like question me about my answer, now I'm getting I'm getting a rise. And then I start going off, and that's why they always like, why you? I've either been told I was nasty.
I've received that end. Yes, that is correct.
Nasty. You ain't gotta be so rude. Why are you so aggressive?
Hostile.
Like, what you mean? I ain't aggressive. You asking me a question, so I'm gonna answer.
No, I know. And then I like to trigger you further by saying, pointing it out immediately when I see that you're reacting.
Yeah.
Because your problem is you're very reactive and you don't. And
I am.
And so I like, it's my form of therapy.
Right,
it's my form of therapy with you.
I didn't ask for that.
I know, but I'm going to give it to you.
I didn't ask for it.
Right. It's to show you where you're getting all crazy and then point out that you're being crazy.
No.
And then make you more crazy by pulling more triggers. Because
no.
It's just, A, it's fun to do, and B, it's a learning lesson for you. It's a
It's
teaching
not a
moment.
learn. No,
Yes.
it's not a teaching
But
moment. No.
but no, you and it's great though that you're starting to recognize this. And I think this is again just part of experience, life. There's certain things you're just not going to know about or think
Right.
about it when you're 20, when you're in your teens. These are things that some of it you just have to learn, right? And you spoke about romantic relationships, and I think about, for me, the area that I probably didn't have explicit boundaries were in my friendships, and this is something that I've been a little bit more deliberate with in the last few years, because I've only had to experience this like a couple times. But one particular friendship, it was a long one, and it's just towards the end we would get into this argument over the same topic at least once a year. And to me, it was just driving me crazy that by like the second time of this argument, it was like an annual exam with your gynecologist. I'm like, I'm not interested in going through this annual
Right.
anymore with you.
Not an annual exam,
Yeah, yeah.
GYN exam. Okay.
That's what it felt like, because it was like this level of anxiety around this one
Right.
particular topic. And I'm like, why am I feeling like this with my friend? And
Yes.
and I
Groundhog
not
Day.
right. And I remember being very clear, like, I don't want to talk about this topic ever again. Like, this is
Hmm.
just not worth our time. 18
And
months
then it came
later,
up, came up again.
the annual came a little bit later than normal. I was like,
But it lasted longer. Look at that.
pero what happened? And at that point, I was just like, I, I had two choices. I realized that I laid out a boundary, it was crossed, and my choices were either to continue to do the song and dance
Right.
with this particular friend, or to distance myself from that friendship. And I had to choose the latter for my
Right.
sanity, for just,
Right.
it just wasn't worth the fighting. It just wasn't worth the anxiety, the agita of dealing with someone that I was so close to. And so, and
Right.
it was for the best for both of us. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's just what happens. That's the normal course of things. But you have to even get to the point where where you realize, like, okay, this is a line in the sand for me,
Right.
and
Right.
this isn't going to work for me anymore.
Right.
And that's okay. But in doing that, people need to recognize too that they may lose something out of that. They may lose some friendships. They may lose the relationships with certain family members. But I'm no longer of that line of thinking of blood. You gotta, no matter what, you gotta be there for your family.
Right. Right.
No, your family's also gotta respect you too. Everybody in this world has to respect you. And for
Exactly.
me, if you can't respect me, then that's a non-starter. I don't care who you are in my life,
Right. Right.
because I show respect to everyone. And this is a part of self-love and self-preservation. My
Yeah. Yeah.
sanity, I need to
No,
preserve
it's
that.
true.
My
Yes.
integrity, I need to
Right.
preserve that. I need to
You
move in
have to be able
integrity.
to, you
Yes.
have to be able, ready and able to just let go of certain
And be
relationships.
okay with those
If it's
consequences.
right, if it's not serving you well, then you need to sever those ties.
I
So
promise
yeah.
you, it will be 100% lighter. You will feel better. It is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
not worth it. And I also think that, again, learn this from our family. Learn this in particular from our parents. Your mom, she wasn't great at boundaries with her family, but your father, our father, he was great at setting boundaries.
Yes. Oh yes. He was
While
the
he
king
was
of, oh, I'm cutting your ass off.
while he was very generous with his time and his love
Hmm.
for people, but if you crossed him in a way that he's just like, and it would take a lot to cross him, because
Right. Right.
he was of such a generous spirit.
Right.
But when you did, he was done. That was it. And you're cut. He's like,
Right.
you only, there's no habitual line steppers with Poppy or
No,
worries
even
Poppy.
when you would tell him, well, why don't you just forgive that person? He was like, I forgave them.
Yeah.
And you're
He's
like,
like,
but
I
you
don't
don't
gotta
even
fuck with them
talk to
though.
them. And he's like, Okay.
Right. And that's when
I'm
I was
like,
like, oh,
yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just like,
This
all
works for you.
right.
But it does because it preserved his sanity.
Right,
Because what he
right,
wasn't going to do was allow anyone to disrespect him. So,
right,
okay, you may have done something once. That's it.
right.
You will
You
never get
only
that
get that
opportunity
once.
again.
Yes, you got that one time, and that was it.
And that was
That
something
was
that I had to
it.
learn. That I was like, oh, this happened already multiple times. I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't let this happen again. I can't talk about the same shit again. That's it.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
That's it.
yeah. No.
So,
And did to that respect, you had mentioned earlier about my kids and um, trying to set those boundaries with them. And it's true, with
mm-hmm,
children, especially I think parents, they try to go above and beyond and want to provide them and give them more than what they were
mm-hmm,
given when they were growing up. Make sure that they have all the opportunities. And I know that for me, it was always frustrated when I feel like there were opportunities that I would, try to help my children obtain, and their mindset was just not there. And I would get so frustrated.
right.
Like, oh my goodness, why wouldn't you want to do this? Why? Why? But then to your point earlier, when you was telling me, like, sometimes you just have to let it go. And I'm like, but that's so hard when it's your child. And you're
Of
like, but you
course.
want the best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, but then I think about
Don't you want
your
the best for
mom.
yourself?
Right. And I think about your mom, how she would, and why she was always, remember how we just like, why are you so upset? Like, if you needed us to do something, just say so. Like,
Right, right.
why are you so angry? And that was like, I started seeing myself being that way
Right,
because
right.
it was, I understand, like, as an adult, I understand why she was always
Yes,
angry,
yes.
right?
As a kid, it made no
Right,
sense.
right. Because she has so much on her plate, and all she wanted was just for us to take
Proactivity.
initiative.
Just show some proactiveness.
Just take the initiative and just do something. Don't just sit there and
Why do
wait
you
for me to
wait for me
tell
to tell
you,
you?
right? Because I don't want to do this.
Basically,
And that's my children. They're
right.
like, I don't want to do this.
And you hate looking at the mirror.
Yes. so so I have learned, and I definitely have let go some things, and you and I have talked about it. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I'm just gonna let it go, and
Right.
let God lead them. I will always be there to support them, but
Right.
it's not gonna be to my detriment.
It's unnecessary
And
stress.
right, right, right. And sometimes I have to kind of let it go in
Yeah.
other ways. I'll talk to you, I'll talk to the therapist, you know, everyone, just to kind of let it, because it does get to me at times. Because, again, you want certain things for your
Mm-hmm.
children, but again, they have their own lives. This is,
Right.
like they always say, you don't own your children. You're here
Right.
to kind of support them in their journey, and that's what I'm trying to.
And that's a mentality
Mm,
that we need to grow out of because that was
yes.
how we grew up. And that's how very much our Dominican family, our parents, and the way our aunts and uncles were
Right.
like, not that they owned us, but it was like, look, you are a reflection of us.
Right. Of this
Therefore,
family.
you
Yep.
need to behave a certain way,
Yep.
XYZ. And it's just like, no, this is that's a curse we have to break.
Yes.
And you thinking about understanding the boundaries that you have been establishing, what are you seeing as some of the benefits from doing that?
Well, like you said, it's a part of your self-love, is it's, self-preservation,
Mm-hmm.
as you pointed out. um I think with so many things going on in this world, that's you should be able to take control of your own life, right?
Right.
What's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you, and you have to be able to identify that, right? And decide, okay, what's this line that I don't want you to cross,
Right.
and decide what's the consequence to crossing that line and commit to that, because that's how you get to teach other people how to
Mm-hmm.
treat you. And
Right.
that's what's going to make you happier, and you end up loving yourself, because that's where, self-love comes
Mm-hmm.
from,
Yep.
is being able to know what those boundaries are for yourself and letting others know by clearly communicating.
Right. No,
Right.
it's true. To your point, or related to what I said earlier about, for me, ha- being more deliberate and
Mm-hmm.
explicit with my boundaries, especially over the last 5 years, 10 years, if I'm including like the most recent relationship with my husband and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. I think I'm with him now and I married him because I was very upfront and clear with him about what I expect out of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in my 20s, I was not always forthright with my expectations or what
Right.
I'm okay with, simply because I was either afraid of the answer or afraid of what the outcome was
Mm-hmm.
going to be. And then in my 30s, when I met my husband, it was just like, no, this is what I could deal with and what I can't deal with.
Right.
So I'm going to be
Right.
very straight up when we first go out. And look, not in some intimidating way, but it's just like I'm just very clear. And
It
if
was,
it did, yeah, and if like,
and
look,
you was okay to walk away
yes,
if
and
it
that was the
wasn't.
biggest thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's
And yeah.
freeing. It's very freeing. And that's what I say, the benefit, part of the benefit of like, yes, the self-love, which is about the self-preservation, but it's also just freeing. It's like this level, there's just like something off your shoulder when you could just express, hey, this is what
Mm-hmm.
I expect, regardless of the relationship, whether it's a friendship, a lover, or a family member. This is what I expect. And if you can't
Yeah.
deliver,
Yeah.
then I'm stepping back. I'm
No.
removing myself
Yep.
from that equation. And
But again, you have to be prepared to
yeah,
do that. So yeah, and I know, like, when it comes to romantic relationships, that's just something that I've never done. I never set boundaries,
mm-hmm.
and that's something that I've learned, from my marriage, my failed marriage, um, and relationships that I've had after that. It's just, yeah. The-
Yeah, and all of those are like, those are learning moments, because
right, right.
while maybe the marriage didn't succeed, but what you got from that, you learned a lot
Oh yeah,
to prepare you for that
absolutely,
next thing, and to
absolutely.
be clear
Because
about, that's how I, to me, my relationships that I had in my 20s, oh, most certainly prepared me for what
right.
I expected and the woman that I grew into, that I continue to evolve to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in this relationship, and just as an individual, of just like, okay, this is what I want and what I expect. And I have a partner that is so open to communicating, that it's just like, okay, yes.
Yeah, I know. You guys do a great job. I'm like, oh wow, y'all really talk through that. If it was me, I probably would have been yelling like, the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, because
That's my problem though.
people are always like surprised. They always think I'm more so ready to get into some sort of confrontation, and I actually don't. I don't like it, but I try to avoid it by being as direct as possible, which is, I guess, a form of confrontation. but but part of me is like, oh, if I'm not direct and clear, then we're gonna have multiple conversations
Yeah,
about this,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
can't do that. I just have
yeah,
a low tolerance, and I think I definitely favor your father in that respect. Although
yeah,
your
you
father is
do.
passive aggressive, I'm more aggressive. But he was the king of petty, and I'm also the queen of
Oh
petty
my
sometimes.
gosh.
So
Oh my gosh.
so
Yeah,
there's certain
yeah,
things that
yeah.
I got from him, and then other things that, yeah, not so much.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. No,
But
that's
just to me, those are the kind of the ways where I establish my boundaries, and to me, it's just about being as direct as possible. And I know that's not easy for everyone,
hmm
but I just don't know any other way. And this is the way that's worked for me. But I know, just reading some articles and stuff, it can very well be things that you write out, right?
yeah.
Or that maybe, you speak to the person and however you want to communicate, there's no right or wrong way to establishing the boundaries. The key is to communicate them, to not expect that people know what your boundaries are too. Because one of this article that I read, it talked about people that need to be communicated explicitly about boundaries are those with a low
So yeah,
emotional
they don't have.
intelligence.
Right.
And so you, you don't, instead of assuming everyone has a high emotional intelligence like
Like
I do,
yourself. Yes,
yes,
like
yes,
yourself.
I can read a room, I can read a person. I just choose, and I use that information to choose how to interact with them.
Right. Not everyone's like you.
I know, I know. And so for those with low emotional intelligence quotient, those are the ones where you need to be very explicit about what is okay and not okay with you. What are your boundaries? And so again, I think establishing them is about how do you communicate that and what are you most comfortable in how you communicate it. But the bottom line is you got to communicate it.
Right, right.
Otherwise,
And
you
yeah.
can't assume people are going to know what your boundaries are.
No, no, you can't. That's true. That's very true. I know. And
They can't read your mind, Nachi.
no, I know. I know. Sometimes I wish they did. Like, why do I have to go into this long ass explanation? But
Who you
I get
telling? I
it.
know, I know.
I get it. But as you said before, being less stressful and that sense of calmness is definitely a benefit
Yes.
from setting these clear boundaries with others. So
Yeah. And so, are there any other ways that to establish boundaries that to add on to what we just discussed?
I think we said, to make sure that you know what your boundaries are. And sometimes it might just take, some time, but
Being introspective.
it's
Yeah, that's actually a good
right,
point. Not
right,
everyone even realizes what their boundaries are.
right, exactly. It's gonna take some time,
Mm-hmm.
but it's taking that journey and deciding, okay, I need to start setting boundaries for myself. And
Right.
things will come up. And when you see something that triggers you, that's when you need to start reflecting and,
That's a good point.
decide, okay, what triggered me and why did it trigger me?
Right.
And deal with that. You got to deal with those issues because that's causing you to be triggered and you haven't dealt with that. And then that will also help you decide what those boundaries are and be able to communicate that. Um, so I think that's for, at least that for me, that's been working where, I don't know what all of my boundaries are,
That's actually a
right?
good point. That's
So,
the starting point should be identifying what your boundaries are, number one,
yep,
right? And then
yes,
followed by how to best communicate those boundaries. And that would likely depend on your audience.
right,
The
exactly.
form, the audience will dictate the form in which you communicate those boundaries. And that's the key. And I hope that our listeners today have taken some good tips or have gotten some insight into themselves and understanding about boundaries and how it's probably impacted their lives in ways that they've not even realized. Like I said earlier in the conversation, I didn't even realize I actually had boundaries, and I was, but without being explicit about them as I am
Mm-hmm.
now into my adulthood. But we all have them. It's just a matter of, or do you support them? Do you enforce them rather,
Right.
and how well do you enforce them? And so, and that's the key. And I hope our listeners today have are taking away some key ideas for themselves and in their lives.
Absolutely.
We know there's a lot going on in this world, and we don't want that to be a distraction to your purpose in life. And so we hope and we want you to continue to make a conscious effort of keeping your vibrations high, your energies high, your frequencies high, and living the best life you can. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at I'm Not Yelling _ and have a wonderful day. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.